But Sister Nada, I wouldn't be worried about being in the middle here because you were way better than Jay. Just trying to mess with Jay because we're debating tomorrow, so I'm gonna have them all psyched out before we even start. You know, Jay mentioned Sam Solomon. That's a weird dude. Mentioned Sam Solomon, knows the entire Quran in multiple languages. Some of you are thinking, wow, I wish I had that brain power. No, you don't. The Lord tends to balance things out, right? If he makes your brain super turbocharged in one area, I guarantee some other parts of your brain are not working very well. And that dude's a perfect example. Super insanely smart and nothing else, right? So yeah, we went to Ethiopia. We were giving talks in front of various leaders, pastors, politicians, judges, things like that, breaking things down for them. And for like 3 days straight, I'm trying to get this dude to laugh. And I'm just being hilarious there, right? I am throwing my best stuff out there, and all I ever get is. So for 3 days, I'm doing this, and eventually we're at this Christian seminary, and we have an Ethiopian friend, Johannes, and we're at this seminary, and I was pouring this caffeine powder into my water so I could drink caffeine. And Johannes is sitting there with Sam Solomon. I'm pouring this caffeine powder into my water, and Johannes from across the room said, "Hey, David, what's that stuff you keep pouring in your water?" And I said, "Oh, it's this cool stuff called mind your own business." And I just went back to what I was doing, right? Sam Solomon's sitting there like this. 6 hours later, I give this dude a granola bar. And he starts to eat the granola bar and he goes, "You know, David, when you said the stuff is called mind your own business, that was funny." And then he bursts out laughing for like 45 minutes straight. Like he had been holding in all his laughter for the previous 12 years and just starts cracking up over that. And so that's what I'm saying. That's weird. Anyway, that's the weirdest dude I've ever met in my life. And for the record, I have been in multiple mental hospitals. And in those multiple mental hospitals, I've met people with multiple personality disorder. Speaking of multiple personality disorder, let's talk about Muhammad's multi-personal Quran. Did you catch that transition? That was good stuff right there. All right, so Muhammad's multi-personal Quran. I'm sure you've heard some objections to the doctrine of the Trinity. Trinity doesn't make sense. How can God be three persons in one God? If Muslims think that's a problem, boy, they got some problems they don't know about yet. And they're never going to hear about those problems from their leaders. They have to hear about the problems from us, or they will never hear about them. And that means we have to learn them so we can share the problem with them and make them rethink their position. So let's get into this. We're going to start with a different kind of example, right? You want to see the problem, because the problem is going to happen over and over and over again on pretty much every issue. So this is a quote about the Quran. We'll start off with the claim about the preservation of the Quran. We'll eventually get to the multi-personality. So this is a quote from an award-winning Muslim apologetics book on miracles of the Quran. Mazhar Qazi writes, Muslims and non-Muslims both agree, notice, even non-Muslims agree, that no change has ever occurred in the text of the Quran. It is a miracle of the Quran that no change has occurred in a single word, a single letter of the alphabet, a single punctuation mark, or a single diacritical mark in the text of the Quran during the last 14 centuries. Now, if you've been following what's been happening over the past few months, you might have heard about the holes in the narrative, right? The holes in the narrative, the infamous Yasser Qadi interview where he said, I don't want to talk about this. Please don't make me talk about this. All I'll say is there are some holes in the narrative. And then he left them with that, right? But basically, Yasser Qadi was being pushed on how to reconcile some various problems with the claim that there's only one Quran perfectly preserved and some other issues And he really didn't want to talk about it because if he had said, yes, one Quran, he knows he would be laughed out of academia for saying that at this point. But if he said, nope, there are different Qurans, well, then he's in a lot of trouble with the Muslims who have been raised on this claim that the Quran's been perfectly preserved right down to the letter. But what I want to draw attention to is this kind of pattern that I keep seeing over and over again. You've got the Muslim scholars and apologists. They'll tell their followers something. It's usually something that's totally, completely wrong. So they'll tell their followers, the Muslim population, the Quran's been perfectly preserved right down to the letter. It's a miracle, unlike the Bible, which has been changed and corrupted. So you go tell your Christian friends that. And then the Muslims run out. Ha ha, our book's been perfectly preserved. Your book's been corrupted. That's why you should all become Muslims. And then eventually, over time, some Christians start looking into the history of the Quran. And they start pointing out, what are you talking about? According to Muslim sources, entire chapters came up missing. Large passages were lost. Verses were eaten by a sheep. Even if you go to modern Qurans, you can find different Qurans, different Arabic Qurans in different parts of the world. This is one of the great things that Jay and Hatun did on Speaker's Corner. They actually brought them. They actually brought a bunch of them out there, dozens of them. So what are you talking about? So here's what happens. The Christians then tell the Muslims, no, you're wrong. There have been changes in the Quran, and there are different Qurans even today. Then the Muslims go back to their leaders. Hey, you told us only one Quran, perfectly preserved right down to the letter. And then their leaders will make some excuse. But you know, the Kirat and the Ahruf and this and that. And then they run back to the Christians. Aha, we've got the answer. And then the Christians eventually look that stuff up. And the Christians respond to the Muslims. Then the Muslims go back. And that's when you get, okay, there are some holes in the narrative. They can't keep denying it, right? Because at this point, they just look like liars, right? People like Yasser Qadi. And he is. I've got proof. So this happens over and over and over again, and we're seeing it. We're seeing what happens when you keep pushing and they finally are forced to admit something, how this starts a kind of tidal wave. And this happens over and over and over again. And what I'm saying is we need to keep pushing. So let me give you another example. So Muslims are also told the Quran is a scientific miracle, not just a miracle of preservation. It's a scientific miracle. So someone like Zakir Naik will tell his followers, the Quran is filled with scientific miracles. It's amazing. No one could have known this stuff. So Muslims run out. Christians, haha, our book is filled with scientific miracles. Muhammad couldn't have possibly known these things that are being revealed. And some people are actually impressed with when they hear this. But they rarely, unfortunately, bother to actually go and check things out. But eventually some Christians start reading the Quran and start finding some passages to bring up. Here's one. Surah 18, verses 83 to 86. They will ask thee of Dhul Qarnayn, supposedly Alexander the Great. Say, I shall recite unto you a remembrance of him. Lo, we made him strong in the land and gave him unto everything a road. And he followed a road till when he reached the setting place of the sun, he found it setting in a muddy spring and found a people thereabout. We said, O Dhul Qarnayn, either punished or show them kindness. So Dhul Qarnayn finds the place where the sun sets, finds the sunsets in a muddy pool. Way out west. You can go there. There are people who live there. So we bring this up. Hey, Muslim friends, you told us scientific miracles. What do you do with the sun setting in a muddy pool? So they go back to their Muslim leaders. They go back to Zakir Naik, right? Zakir, what do we do? You told us scientific miracles. And you can actually look at Zakir Naik's responses on this. Oh, when it says reach the setting place of the sun, the setting of the sun can refer to time, like night. So if you do that, he even says, the problem is solved. Direct quote from Zakir Naik. The problem is solved. Now notice, that makes no sense, right? And he followed a road till when he reached the time of the setting place of the sun. What are you talking about? Now it doesn't make any sense. He's talking about the place he reached, right? And then, of course, you point out that Muhammad in Sunan Abu Dawud, their hadith collection, actually says the same thing. And he's clearly not talking about time. He asks one of his followers and says, do you know where the sun goes when it sets? He says, no, you're the prophet. He says, it goes and sets in a pool. So the response doesn't work. But this is the pattern you see over and over and over again. The Muslim leaders give the Muslims a myth as if we're never going to investigate it. And then the Muslims go around using that for their dawah, using it to refute Christianity. And then the Christians eventually look some things up, respond to the Muslims. Muslims go back to their guys. Guys give them some superficial response, then take it to them, which satisfies them, because the response isn't really meant to be a refutation. It's meant to calm these guys down, because they're starting to get nervous. And they're starting to think that there's some holes in the narrative. So you have to calm their doubts, right? But if the Christians just keep on, if the Christians keep going, right, all of these things break down. And so this isn't just true of these myths about the perfect preservation of the Quran, of the scientific miracles. You'll find the same pattern if you start getting into some theological issues. I'm bringing this up because this is an awesome direction to start going in. And this will be cool because Anthony's debating tomorrow. He's debating Shabir Ali on the doctrine of Tawheed. So that's the Islamic doctrine of oneness. Anthony hasn't shown me his opening statement or anything, but I know Anthony has some pretty phenomenal material on this, and that it's kind of wide open. So what I'm saying is that we're starting to get some cracks in the confidence of lots of Muslims on an issue like the preservation of the Quran. If we keep going after all these issues, wow, I think we're going to see some awesome things here real quick. Like, so cool area to go in is more theological direction. So follow the same pattern here. Surah 33:56 of the Quran. Surely Allah and his angels pray for the Prophet. O you who believe, pray for him and salute him with a worthy salutation. Now, if you look in lots of Quran translations, it'll say Allah and his angels praise the Prophet or send blessings upon the Prophet or something like that. If you look it up in the Arabic, it says they pray. In fact, who was talking about the Bridges 10 Kirat compilation? Who was I talking about that? I was talking to someone earlier. Who was that? You don't even remember who you are? Anyway, wait, was it you? Were you talking about the Bridges 10 Kirat compilation? Okay, were you supposed to raise your hand then? Because I said. So you're familiar with this, right, Jay? That Bridges 10 Kirat compilation. Go to Surah 33:56 in there and look what it says. They give their version, and then they say in a note, literally it says prayers, right? So literally it says prayers. And guess what? Well, you might think that should be a problem if Allah is really obsessed with showing that he's this, absolute monad of a deity. He shouldn't be saying that he prays. And they say, it means something else there. It means something else. Well, anything you say that he was trying to say, there are perfectly good Arabic ways of saying that without saying that he prays, right? Why did he use that? Especially when he spends the rest of the Quran bragging about how clear his communications are. So no matter how you look at it, it's just a problem. Even if you want to say it means something else, you're still stuck with, why does a God who really, really wants to convince people of this absolute oneness, why is he using that, especially when he constantly brags about being so clear? And then an additional problem would be what happens when you go to the Hadith and you find all kinds of passages about Allah praying. Got some problems here, right? But if you follow what happens, it's the same pattern, right? Muslim scholars and apologists tell Muslims, you see, our theology is this crystal clear, pure oneness. Christians have this confusing stuff about the Trinity. And then the Muslims go out, your theology's all confusing. Ours is easy. A child could understand it because that's how you come up with the correct definition of God. If a baby could understand it, it must be true, right? And what happens if we start looking up some of these problems? We'll go through a couple, and then we'll get to the multi-personality of the Quran. But you bring up something like this. They'll go back. Well, it says this. Their leaders are going to give them an answer, right? Well, there it means praises. No explanation whatsoever. No basis in the language whatsoever, but they'll say it. Then they'll run back to you and insist upon it, right? So you just have to start doing some work and then showing them, even your own sources say it literally means Allah is praying. And then you break it down for that. Why is your God, who claims to be perfectly clear in his language, why is he using a word that means something completely different from what he's trying to say. Because Allah has that problem a lot. Allah says, fight those who do not believe in Allah. Allah, what do you mean? You ask Muslims. He means only fight people who are attacking you first. Why didn't he say it like that then? Especially when he's perfectly clear. So, same point. And the point I really want to make here is, when you bring up an argument, you hear an argument from Jay Smith, you go use it with your Muslim friend, and you get shot down. Don't get all discouraged and, wow, he refuted me. There's something wrong with the response. There's something wrong with it. Do some more investigating, and then you can find it, and then you can expose it. And that's what you have to do. Muslims are trained to have superficial responses on a lot of these issues. You just have to keep pushing. Here's another one. This is one example. I don't want to give too many of these because I don't want to steal Anthony's thunder tomorrow. But I love this one. Allah's Shin. You read the Muslim sources, Allah has all kinds of body parts. Now, Christians, we would tend to interpret those passages the same way we would interpret passages in the Bible, which talk about, God's eyes seeing things, right? We're not thinking literal eyes. We're thinking that's anthropomorphic language to help us understand God's omniscience, right? If you're talking about God's hands or something like that, we're thinking that this is anthropomorphic language to help us understand God's power. And so we think, when the Muslim sources are talking about Allah having all these different body parts, it's just doing the same thing. No. Not according to mainstream Islamic theology, not according to the earliest Islamic theology, not according to Salafis. These are literal body parts. And the reason they argue this is these don't make any sense if you're trying to interpret them anthropomorphically. So here's an example. This is from Sahih al-Bukhari. This is a very, very long hadith. No way we'll read it here. It would take almost the entire time to just read it. So here's the section. I'll give you the gist, though. It's basically Allah is showing up to different groups at the judgment, and he's taking on different forms. And then he's appearing in these different forms, and Muslims are sitting there seeing him in these different forms, and they're trying to figure out what's going on. And then the prophets are going to speak. So here, we'll pick it up right there. And none will speak to him then, but the prophets. And then it will be said to them, be said to the prophets here, do you know any sign by which you can recognize him? By which you can recognize Allah, because he's appearing in all these different forms to people. Is there any way you can know the real Allah when he appears? They will say the Shin. And the prophets know this. They will say the Shin, and so Allah will then uncover his Shin, whereupon every believer will prostrate before him, and there will remain those who used to prostrate before him just for showing off and for gaining good reputation. So, is there a way, if Allah were in front of you taking on different forms of different things that different groups have worshipped over the millennia? Allah is taking on all these different forms. Is there any way you could recognize the real Allah? The prophets say his Shin. And so Allah is going to lift up his robe and say, there it is. And they're going to say, it's the real Allah. If this is figurative, or what in the world does any of this mean? They have a bunch of things like this. And so the classic understanding of this is that this is referring to Allah's actual body parts. They'll say the body parts are not the same as human body parts. We can't understand really what the body parts are like, but Allah has body parts. And so think about this when someone's making fun of, you believe that Jesus is God when he had a body. What are you talking about? What are you talking about right here? Your God's got a body. Only difference is, in Christianity, the Word became flesh. He wasn't that way from eternity. Here, your God is just always at least a Shin. He's got some eyes, got a couple of right arms and things like that. But so the point is, if Christians learn some of this, someone starts coming to Christians making fun of the Christian theology, you start pointing some of this out, guess what? They don't know this. They don't know this stuff. All right. Now let's get into the personal Quran. Not the multi-personal Quran yet, the personal Quran. The Quran is a person. The Quran is the eternal speech of Allah, but the eternal speech of Allah is a person. This is interesting because in Islam you have Allah and his eternal speech and the eternal spirit who proceeds out of him. The spirit, according to the Quran, appears in the form of a man. So the spirit is personal. It proceeds eternally from Allah. Allah's speech is eternal, being spoken eternally by Allah, and yet it's a person too. What do you got there already? Notice, Allah, Allah's eternal word, and his eternal spirit. Starting to sound like a bad copy of Christianity? I think so too. But the Quran is personal. Check this out. Recite the Quran, Sahih Muslim, 1874. Recite the Quran, for it will come on the day of resurrection, interceding for its companions. The Quran is going to come interceding for its companions. How's a book going to do that? Well, he tells us. It's from Muhammad. The Quran will meet its companion on the day of resurrection. So his companion, a Muslim. Right? The Quran will meet its companion on the day of resurrection when his grave is opened for him in the form of a pale man. The Quran's going to appear in the form of a pale man. Hey, Veda, did you know that Muhammad bought, owned, sold, and traded black African slaves? And yet, notice what the Quran appears as, a pale man. Why has it got to be pale, Muhammad? All right. In the form of a pale man, it will say to him, do you recognize me? He will say, I do not recognize you. By the way, who's speaking here? The Quran and his companion. It will say to him, do you recognize me? He will say, I do not recognize you. It will say, I am your companion, the Quran, who kept you thirsty on hot days and kept you awake at night. So notice, the Quran appears as a pale man. The Quran is personal. And by the way, there are tons of passages in the Muslim sources about the Quran interceding and so on at the judgment. So it's speaking, remembers things, intercedes. This is a personal agent. But not that simple. The Multi-Personal Quran. Sunan Abu Dawud, 1400. There is a surah in the Quran, this is again Muhammad speaking, there is a surah in the Quran which consists of 30 verses. This is Surah 67, I believe, Surah Al-Mulk. It will intercede on behalf of its companion until he is forgiven. Notice, there's a surah. That's chapter 67 of the Quran that will intercede on behalf of its companion. So wait a minute, the Quran as a whole appears as a pale man, but one chapter of the Quran also appears. Okay, well maybe that's the only person in the Quran, right? Wrong. Sahih Muslim 1874. We read the first part. Now let's continue reading. Recite the Quran, for it will come on the day of resurrection, interceding for its companions. Recite the two bright ones, Surah Al-Baqarah and Surah Al-Imran, those surahs 2 and 3. For they will come on the day of resurrection as if they were two clouds, or as if they were two shadows, or as if they were two flocks of birds in ranks, pleading on behalf of their companions. So these are two chapters of the Quran appearing as flocks of birds, pleading on behalf of their companions. Let's read one more along those lines. Jami at-Tirmidhi. An-Nawas bin Saman narrated that the Prophet said, the Quran shall come, and its people who acted according to it in the world, Surah Al-Baqarah and Al-Imran, those are chapters of the Quran, shall be in front of it. So you've got the Quran, but then you've got individual chapters in front of it. An-Nawas said, the Messenger of Allah stated 3 parables about them, which I have not since forgotten. He said, they will come as if they are 2 shades between which there is illumination, or as if they are 2 shady clouds, or as if they are shadows of lines of birds arguing on behalf of their people. Shadows of lines of birds. Notice this bird theme, right? Individual chapters are these flocks of birds. But guess what? They're personal agents. They're, what's it say right here? Arguing on behalf of the people. Individual chapters of the Quran, arguing, pleading, interceding, individual chapters. Now, it doesn't say all 114 chapters of, well, that would be today's Quran. All 114 chapters of today's Quran are these personal agents, but I think you can gather that, right? Muhammad keeps talking about individual chapters of the Quran being these flocks of birds to intercede for you. Well, I think you've got a situation where Muslims say, ha, you dumb Christians, you think 1 + 1 + 1 = 1. Well, you think 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 all the way up to 114 = 1. But it would actually be 115 because you have Allah, and these are all the Quran. So notice, the Quran, there are 114 personal agents within the Quran, at least. That's assuming we don't say, wait, flock of birds is a chapter. Maybe the individual verses are individual birds, in which case you have a lot more. Let's just go with the 114 personal agents in the Quran, pleading, arguing, testifying, things like that. And yet, they can all appear as one man. Now, Muslims, what was your objection to the doctrine of the Trinity? Because if you're saying, well, 3 persons in one God is kind of confusing, well, what do you do with God and his eternal spirit, which is a person, and his eternal word, which is a person, but his eternal word, which is a person, is also 114 persons within that one person? What do you do with that? Because that sounds kind of confusing to me. Now, all those Muslims who heard from their leaders, the Christians are so confused in their theology. Ours is so simple. God's just one. How many of them do you think have been told anything I just said? Notice, that's from their prophet. That is from their prophet. And that information is kept from them by their leaders to give them a false confidence in the simplicity of their religion. And what you're looking for is you, as the Christian, bringing the information from their prophet to them that then forces them to go back to their leaders. Can you explain this? Can you explain this? Can you explain that? Can you explain this? Guess what? You're going to get shot down. They're going to come back with some superficial answers. You got to keep pushing, right? Because eventually they're going to go to their leaders and say, I don't think that makes sense. And what you're going to get is this sort of light switch moment where everything sort of tilts into place. There's a turning point. And the turning point you're looking for with Muslims, this light switch moment, is when the Muslim says, I've been told all my life, perfect preservation right down to the letter. I've been told all my life, scientific miracles. I've been told all my life, Islam has this pure, simple theology. And now I'm hearing the teachings of my prophet from Christians who are completely destroying all of that. And if my leaders told me wrong about all of that, the essential features of our religion, if they lied to me about all of that, what else were they lying to me about? Yeah, so anyway, again, that is the pattern that you're looking for right there, right? Go to their leaders, you get shut down. They go back to their leaders, you get shut down. You bring more information, they go back to their leaders, bring it back to you, you get shut down. Eventually, they find out there's some holes in the narrative. And then guess what? Who's been lying to them the entire time? My leaders. Who's been telling me the truth the entire time? These Christians. Well, if I want to start having some serious discussions about theology and religion and how I can know the true God, who do I need to be listening to? If my religion were true, would it need to be built on a foundation of lies? And if these people who've been telling me nothing but lies also told me don't trust these Christians, and yet the Christians have been doing nothing but telling me the truth, maybe I've got all of this wrong here. Maybe I need to look into this for myself. And when that happens, you are talking to someone who is on his way out of Islam. All right?